about the work that the Integrated Community Health Coalition is doing around equity. And specifically today, we'll be talking about justice transformation. And so we've brought a few speakers together today so we could learn more about what's happening regarding justice transformation and really think about how that translates to the service provider Area 7 community. So again, thank you again for joining this series. This is the Now is the Time transformation series. And again, it has been kind of organized by the Integrated Community Health Coalition that I'm a part of, and several folks on the call are a part of. The purpose today is really to focus our town hall on engagement around addressing the global health pandemic and other social justice issues. We're specifically interested in the systemic inequities that are found across health, education, mental health and substance use, criminal justice, and the housing system. And today, our focus again will be on justice transformation. The town hall featured guests are Aunisis Hernandez. Aunisis is the co-executive director and founder of La Defensa. And we will also be hearing from Judge Peter Espinoza, the director of Health Services, Office of Diversion and Reentry. And finally, we'll be hearing from Troy Vaughn. You can see all his numerous educational accomplishments by his name, who is the executive director of the Los Angeles Regional Reentry Partnership, LARP for short. All these three folks have been key movement makers and creators within justice transformation. And so we're really excited that you'll be able to hear from them, learn from them, and ask questions at the end of their presentations. The town hall series agreements. So we recognize that there's a high level of stress happening right now and harm that many of us are experiencing within our communities. And so this may be enhanced by the difficulties that come up when we're addressing the topics that we're talking about today. So we ask that you be mindful of a few things. First, safety first. We want to ensure that you're taking care of yourself as we move through this conversation. Be mindful of the difficult topics we'll be engaged in, the self-care that's needed to continue to engage in the topic. Be mindful of sincerity and compassion as we talk with each other. Respect and patience, especially when we're living, and talking through Zoom. There's always sometimes technological glitches, so please be patient with us. Positive regard, and be mindful of the Zoom features. So, updating your name, using the chat to share questions. We hope that you can stay on mute while the presenters are speaking. And then there'll be a moment after each presenter is done sharing for you to ask questions either through the chat or to unmute yourself and ask the question. So yeah, those are the agreements that we want to move through. Additionally, again, we really want to thank you for being a part of this town hall. We really generated this series of town halls for a few reasons. We wanted to hold discussions that were centered on equity at the local, community, systemic, and global level. We wanted to celebrate the successes and lessons learned as we navigated this pandemic and navigate racial equity issues on a daily basis. We wanted to use this space as a place to educate one another. And we really wanted to create a safe virtual space so that education could move forward. And finally, we created this space so that we could offer solutions and promote movement toward resolution and accountability in the issues that are most important to us. Awesome. So first, I just want to welcome my friend, my colleague, Aunisis Hernandez. Aunices is a policy advocate and campaign strategist with several years of experience working with local and state legislators, system actors, and communities most devastated by criminalization, the war on drugs, and mass incarceration. She is a native of Los Angeles and the daughter of Mexican immigrants who knows the detrimental impacts that criminalization has on immigrants and communities of color by way of her experience in advocacy, running campaigns, and providing direct services to people impacted by mass incarceration and criminalization. Most recently, Onisis was the Los Angeles campaign coordinator for the Just Leadership USA, where she worked as a coordinator for Justice LA, a coalition that stopped LA County's $3.5 billion jail plan. Before that, Onisis was a policy coordinator with the Drug Policy Alliance, where she worked on passing numerous California ballot measures, including the historic marijuana legislation initiative, Prop 64. And she also worked on felony reclassification initiative, Prop 47. And she has advocated for civil asset forfeiture reform, sentencing reform legislation, and legislation that has allocated millions of dollars for pre-booking diversion programs. Onisis is a friend of mine, a colleague, and I am really excited to have her here today. Her work is definitely impacting Los Angeles, California, and the nation. And yeah, I'm excited to have her. Welcome.
Thank you, Diana. Thanks for having me, everyone. I'm really excited to talk with you all this morning and really excited to do this along some people that I admire, Diana, Judge Espinoza, and Troy Vaughn, who I've had the pleasure of working with on some of these issues for quite some time. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the history about this work that we've been doing for some time, also trying to fold in racial equity and how we've been trying to address that, some current opportunities, and then COVID-19 responses. So I won't take too much time, but I'll go pretty fast. And so, like Diana mentioned, we've been doing this work, and we have been doing this work for a while. I think I can look back and say 5 years ago is when we started some of these projects, and we felt like we were just babies, but we've advanced leaps and bounds since then. And so Diana in particular, though, has been doing this work, I think, her whole life and has been the leader of this work for over a decade in LA County. So thank you, Diana, for everything you've done to help free our people and get resources to our communities. So I'm going to talk prior COVID-19, and then I'll get into, what our current landscape is right now. So prior to COVID-19, LA County had a plan to build 2 new jails. It had, created the Office of Diversion and Reentry. It had done a lot of things to kind of move away from this need to want to build jails, but it wasn't moving fast enough. And just to give you some information on the demographics of what the jail population looked like, for example, LA County had the largest jail population in the entire country and still does, with average daily before COVID-19 of 17,000 every single day. 44% of those 17,000, which is a little bit over 7,000 people, were there because they could not pay bail. I think it was, and what that means is that they just didn't have money to pay for their freedom. And so that's pre-COVID-19. We also know that pre-COVID-19, there were over 5,000 people who had been identified by the RAND group to have behavioral health needs, such as substance use or mental health needs. And they identified that 61% of those 5,000 people, or over 5,000 people, could be better served in our communities. And so that's where we were pre-COVID-19. The status quo was not good. And now we're experiencing a global pandemic layered upon what is finally a powerful uprising I believe in our time around communities fighting back against state-sanctioned violence, particularly police state-sanctioned violence, like the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and even folks in California, like Sean Monterrosa and others. And so the prior landscape before COVID-19 wasn't working for us, but we were advancing things. In 2015, there was a creation of the Office of Diversion and Reentry, which Judge Peter Espinoza leads. And since then, it has, it has given us a clear example of what it means to actually invest in services that help people. And it's given us the data to prove that, right? I think for years, we've always been saying like our communities need resources. Our messaging and advocacy has not changed. We've always been, we need resources for our community. We need community-based services. And ODR finally gave us the data that we needed to prove that. And so now that we're in COVID-19, I'm going to say a landscape, as advocates, we see this as a door being opened wide, but it's not going to be opened wide for a long time. So there's a lot of advocacy happening in the now, even though there's all of these things that are layered that you would imagine would stifle advocacy or movements, but it's actually done the opposite. During this moment of COVID-19, the LA County jail population has dropped by over 5,000 people in less than a couple of months. This was something that was told to us that would be impossible. And over 5,000 people were reduced in a couple of months. So for us, COVID-19 really highlighted some of the, how unnecessary some of the things that we were doing as a county are, right? For example, the sheriff said that instead of arresting 300 people every day, they were gonna reduce it down to 30 to 60 people every day, which just kind of shows, again, how this system doesn't need to be incarcerating these number of people, and how people just need housing, need jobs. And so, like, I'm just going to take a step back and again illustrate. Prior to COVID-19, we were the status quo was not working for us, and we were told that the things that we wanted, which was care first, weren't going to be possible because there were no resources. And now, with a reduction of over 5,000 people, with community building a tremendous power to push back against the actual usage of, these different systems such as the sheriff and the courts, now we're in a place where there's $0 bail being implemented as well under COVID-19. We were told, we're not going to be able to get rid of cash money bail. We're not going to be able to do all these things prior to COVID-19. And now statewide, there was a rule by the Judicial Council to implement $0 bail in all counties. That has been rescinded, and now it's up to each county to implement it. But it showed that we don't need to be charging people for their freedom. You can just not incarcerate people pre-trial and just let them go and offer them services. So that's just what I want to highlight, that the COVID-19, as horrendous as it's been an actual opportunity for us to advance the things that we've been demanding for a long time. And so now we're in a moment where the county is not moving forward with building a $3.5 billion jail plan. It's actually working to invest in alternatives to incarceration. And even just to take a step back as well, last year, Diana and others really led the creation of what's called the Alternatives to Incarceration Report, the Care First Jails Last report. And this report has over 115 recommendations on how we can keep our people out of the jails, how we can keep our people out of the ERs, and how we can keep law enforcement away from our people as well, because a significant portion of the report is actually preventative services and preventative community-based resources. And so there has been a fund created, which is called the ATI Fund. Although there's no resources in it yet, it's a step that the county has taken to really move forward in this Care First, Jail Last, landscape. One thing that we've been saying is that, alternatives to incarceration in the Care First Jail report are actually the responses that we need to address COVID-19, right? People need housing. People need employment services and jobs. People need access to a health infrastructure and healthcare services. Those are the same things that people are demanding as responses to COVID-19. And they're the same things that we're demanding in the ATI report. Right now, we're in a moment where we're seeing thousands of families line up for food banks. We're at the point where, thousands of families are at the brink of eviction. And so the things that we say are alternatives to incarceration are actually the things that will help our communities thrive during this COVID-19 pandemic. I just want to touch on some opportunities that we have now. I touched on a lot of great things that have happened, but there's also a lot of opportunities that are up ahead of us, right? The jail population dropped by 5,000. There's actually a motion that the board put forward to create a plan to close Men's Central Jail down within the year. That would mean, pause real quick, it costs about $150 million every single year just to run Men's Central Jail. And that's not even including the refurbishment dollars, right? Because MCJ is a dungeon, it's an old facility, the oldest in LA County, and it costs hundreds of millions of dollars more to just keep it from breaking down, right? And so the plan to shut it down is an opportunity for us to see what we can do with resources that are not going to be funneled into keeping, you know, this facility open, and what can we do with that, right? The ATI fund is also an opportunity to actually invest in the things we need. And to that point, there's a measure that's going to be on the ballot in November, Measure J, which we're saying it's Measure J for justice, Measure J for joy, J for jobs, because what the resources from Measure J, once they would be moved into two buckets, which are community reinvestment for youth jobs and programming, housing. Also, it would create jobs to actually build out this infrastructure of the alternatives to incarceration system, which we've been calling it the decentralized system of care, right? Because what we've seen is that services currently are, how do I say this, are very targeted in certain locations. They're saturated in certain locations, but in other places like Lancaster, Pomona, there are no resources. And so when we envision for ATI is this decentralized system of care. So there would even be resources to create those jobs, but also there would be resources to invest into ATI and community-based pretrial services. So that's a huge opportunity for us to actually move resources that, you know, community-based service providers and the community have never had access to before. So that's also another opportunity. And something that Diana and I have been working on for quite some time that I feel like is, you know, it's just really exciting to see happening now is the reassessment of how AB 109 resources are actually being distributed. So I'm sure a lot of you know in 2011, AB 109 passed at the legislative level that shifted so non-serious, non-violent, non-sexual offenders from prisons to jails, but also, and I take that back, people who have been identified as non-nons, instead of serving their time in prison and jail, they would serve it in the county jails, and they would be under the supervision of probation. So with that came millions of dollars. LA County is the largest county in the state, and so it's receiving a lion's share of the AB 109 dollars. I think the last time I checked, it was over $400 million that the county was getting. Over 80% of those funds, as I'm sure the service providers know, have gone to the legal system. So probation and the sheriffs for the most part, which has left community-based service providers and health departments with, you know, 20% or less of those funds. And so this reassessment of how AB 109 dollars are distributed is also another critical opportunity for us to be able to get the resources we need to actually build out the system of care. And throughout this whole time that I've been doing advocacy, that Diana has been doing advocacy, and others, which has been over a decade, the messaging has never changed, right? We haven't gone from like, we want more services to something else. It's been the same thing. We want housing, we want jobs, we want community-based services. And I think that's been very profound, because now it's taken us this long to finally be able to have the opportunities to get those resources in. And so I mentioned those opportunities because we've been fighting to make some of those things happen for a very long time. And what that actually could mean it could mean the distribution of resources into, and when I mean resources, I mean hundreds of millions of dollars into community-based resources. So I'm gonna leave it at that and can add in at the end, but we're in a moment that I don't think anybody else has ever seen before, with COVID-19, layered with community power, layered with these opportunities to move resources in a time where the fiscal uncertainty is keeping a lot of things from moving forward. We have the opportunity to finally move forward on the things we know are gonna help our communities thrive. And so I'll leave you all with that. But this is a time where we have to take action and really plug in, and folks are gonna have to advocate for themselves so that they are not lost in this process and then the process of moving resources. Sorry if I was long-winded.
Not at all. Thank you so much for all of that rich history and the current opportunities that are presenting themselves. We'll leave it open for any questions first. Are there any questions for Onesies? You could take yourself off of mute or use the chat, and we'll have questions after each of the speakers, and then, you know, just some time for questions at the end too that might come up.
Eunice, I have a question, or at least commentary to make. As you were speaking very passionately, could it be said that the COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated the advocacy and even made more pronounced the talking points that merit legislative change that's desperately needed?
You're muted.
I'm sorry, not able to hear you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. So yes, and thank you for that question. So COVID-19 has highlighted a couple of things. It has highlighted, for the most part though, the communities that we have least invested into, right? So who are the folks that are dying mostly from COVID-19, and what are the communities that are getting the highest infection rates? It's Black and Latino communities, right? And for the most part, these are the communities that we haven't invested in either. They don't have the same healthcare access that other communities have. They don't have the same community-based resources in their community that other communities have. So what COVID-19 has done is accelerated the demands that we have had for a long time, because it's highlighting for everyone now the struggles that these communities have been going through for decades. And so this is not something new. It's just put it on a global platform, what's actually been happening and the lack of investment that we have made in those communities. I just want to highlight something that, you know, when COVID-19 started, I saw a picture of a police officer in full riot gear from head to toe, and how they didn't have to wait to get those resources to respond to the community outcries that were happening. Like, they were ready to go. Yet there were images of doctors and nurses wearing trash bags, having to reuse PPE. And that is really, that's highlighting what has been happening for decades. A lack of investment in creating a health infrastructure, and a super overinvestment in the legal system and law enforcement, and the systems that haven't actually made our community safer or have helped our communities thrive. Because if they would have been doing that, then we wouldn't be seeing Black and Latino communities dying at disproportionate rates. And also, we wouldn't see them getting incarcerated at disproportionate rates as well, because Black people make 8% of the LA County population, and make up over 30% of the jail population. And so it's just, COVID-19 is accelerating our demands, but also because it's highlighting what these communities have gone through for decades.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you so much. Yeah, definitely. And one thing I want to underscore and highlight, because I learned that with respect to what you indicated, 300-person arrest rate down to 30, that's almost like a 9 to 10-fold reduction in the arrest rate, which I would think that it shows that, hey, something else can be done, but it was denied all along. And I think those alternatives that are being utilized or done really speak to that truth. And I think that is a very noteworthy. So I do appreciate learning that from you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm really excited to hear what Judge Espinoza has to say, because they, in the short amount of existence, have done a better job than a lot of other existing work that's been happening in the county. I mean, the recidivism rates from the people that they're serving are minimal. And so even people who have the most serious mental health needs or behavioral health needs are actually thriving in our community. So, I mean, I can't wait to hear what Judge Espinoza has to say, but it just goes all along to say, like, there are other things that can help our communities, and in a better way than the jails.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Any other comments, questions, reflections? Okay. All right. So we will send it now over to Peter, and I'm just going to share a little bit more about Judge Peter Espinoza. Judge Espinoza is recently retired and currently serves as the Director of Health Services for the Office of Diversion and Reentry, ODR. Over the course of his career, Judge Espinoza has had virtually every assignment in the court, including supervising judge of both the Southeast District and the Criminal Division of the LA Superior Court. He has also served in leadership positions, including the court's executive committee, supervising judges committee, community outreach / diversity committee, and as a member of the California Judicial Council. Judge Espinoza earned his JD from UCLA School of Law, where he served as the chair of the Chicano Law Students Association. Upon graduation, he was a Howard University Reginald Herbert Smith Fellow, and in 1990 became a Los Angeles Superior Court Commissioner. Judge Espinoza has received numerous awards and commendations across his tenure, including special recognition from the Los Angeles County DA in 2001, Judicial Excellence Award in 2001, Criminal County Bar Association Criminal Justice Section. Let's wait, Criminal Courts Bar Association, MABA Benjamin Aranada Judicial Excellence Award in 2004, and Judge of the Year in 2011 from the LA County Bar Association on Criminal Justice. And he has also received the Judicial Excellence Award in 2013, and the Judge of the Year again in 2013 from the Armenian American Bar Association. He has a Distinguished Alumni Award from the Community College League of California in recognition of the work that he did to divert young people from incarceration into community college as a term of condition and probation. And then he was also named Judge of the Year again in 2016 for the Southeast District Bar Association. So many wonderful awards, Judge Espinoza. I have had the pleasure of being able to work and learn from Judge Espinoza the last few years as a county employee, and just again appreciate the work that him and his office have done to develop an alternative vision to incarceration, while diverting numerous people with behavioral health issues from the jails into community-based care. So thank you so much, Judge Espinoza, for being here. And yeah, I'll give it to you. And I'm gonna share my screen so that I can share some of your slides.
Thank you, Diana. I don't think I would have sent you my CV if I knew you were going to read it from cover to cover, but thank you for that warm introduction. I feel like I'm coming home today. I spent most of my judicial career in the Southeast District supervising judges at the Whittier Courthouse, Downey Courthouse, and Bellflower Courthouse from my spot in the Norwalk Courthouse. I served on the board of LA CAUTA for a number of years and the Hispanic Outreach Task Force, and have done a lot of Whittier-based sort of things. So it's great to be back. I'm going to talk to you, and I'm going to time myself here. I'm going to talk to you about the Office of Diversion and Reentry, which I've had the good fortune to be allowed to stand up and direct since 2016. Our mission at the Office of Diversion and Reentry, as originally defined, was to implement countywide criminal justice diversion for persons with mental health and or substance use disorders and provide reentry support services to vulnerable justice-involved populations. Our goal is to reduce the number of folks in the county jail who are there simply because they have a mental illness or a substance use disorder, and provide them with services to reduce recidivist behavior and improve their health outcomes. It's already been referred to by Eunice, the work that we do in the jail. We have removed more than 5,700 folks from the jail in a 5-year period and placed them in either community restoration programs or permanent supportive housing. And I'm going to try to talk briefly about that process. We consider the work that we do very much a public safety initiative. The folks that we deal with are eventually coming out of jail or prison. We're just getting them out quicker. In many instances, saving people from the trouble of being sentenced to state prison. The way that it works is our clinical team, which is chaired by a forensic psychiatrist whose name is Christian Ochoa, do a careful forensic assessment of a patient in custody, both clinically and legally, before requesting a court date to have the person removed from custody and placed into one of our programs. A hearing as to whether or not patients will be placed in ODR is determined by a judge. It's a very adversarial process involving the DA and defense counsel and the judge. If someone is released to us, they come to us through the Sheriff's Department's Conditional Transition Unit. Our folks don't wander out of the jail in the middle of the night. They are kept for us by the Sheriff's Department until one of our service providers appears at the jail to transport them to their first interim housing site. So I don't normally present with slides. Diana was kind enough in her work with the elderly to do this for me today. So I'm not in control of the slides. Let's see here. So our plan is a permanent supportive housing plan, and when we say permanent, we mean permanent. If people agree to stay med compliant and comply with the very simple rules of our housing, we will keep them for life. That is the county's commitment, well beyond their obligation to the court if they come to us under a court order. We have provided services to 2,788 folks through our ODR housing program. I want to talk to you a little bit about our felony pretrial program. Go ahead, Diana. Which is the point of entry for most of the people in our permanent supportive housing program. Our felony pretrial program operated initially out of the Central Judicial District. It is now a county-wide program. I think I'm going to talk about MIST first. I'm going to talk about the programs and strategies in the order of their implementation. When I was hired, the MIST program was already in full force and effect. It was a program that removes individuals who are charged with misdemeanors and mentally incompetent to stand trial from the jail and into housing. We have served over 2,000 people in this program. What used to happen prior to the creation of our MIST CBR program is that individuals would stay in the county jail for up to a year, being involuntarily medicated until they hit the end of their jurisdictional limit and the court could no longer hold them and they would simply be released into the community. With the advent of our MIST CBR program, we are removing them from the jail to provide those restoration services in a much more humane and productive environment. And then we are transitioning them into our permanent supportive housing. And a significant percentage of those folks stay with us, as I've indicated, beyond their legal obligation to stay with us. We were so successful with our misdemeanor incompetent to stand trial program that the Department of State Hospitals, who always have a wait list in the county jail, it can be as high as 500 and the wait can be as long as 6 months once somebody's been declared incompetent. The Department of State Hospitals asked if we could create a program in Los Angeles County similar to the one that we use for misdemeanors for felons. And it's the FIST program. We have removed 551 clients from the jail and placed them into community-based restoration programs and put them on a track to ODR housing and permanent supportive housing once they have been restored to competency. This is a significantly different program from MIST because the consequences for these patients are so great because they are charged with felonies. We're very proud of it. In 2018, the California legislature created a new way for courts to authorize pretrial diversion of individuals who have a serious mental disorder and charged with certain felony or misdemeanor crimes. It's actual diversion. It's not. So when we refer to our work as diversion, what we're referring to primarily is diverting people from the jail. It's not diversion as lawyers understand it, where at the end of the diversionary period, the charges are dismissed. That's not how it works. This is an actual diversion program where nobody pleads guilty, nobody's put on probation, and folks, if they complete their program with us, have their charges dismissed. It is funded by the Department of State Hospitals. It's not being done anywhere else in California, and it's hugely successful. We've reduced, prior to COVID, we had significantly reduced the wait list and the wait time. The COVID pandemic has created a problem for anyone who's going to the state, either state prison or state hospital, because the state is not accepting anybody. And so when we know that the population of the county jail is starting to creep back up, it's at around 13,000 right now, from a low of below 12,000. More than 1,500 of those folks are people on their way to state prison or the state hospital who are just sitting around waiting for the state to start receiving people again. So our program is more critical than ever. This is a program I'm particularly proud of. It's our maternal health program. We were directed by the Board of Supervisors back in 2018 to create a program to remove women who are pregnant from the county jail. The need to remove pregnant women became even more critical with the outbreak of the pandemic because they are in that population of people in the jail who are considered at high risk or vulnerable to the virus. And so we have been removing people from the county jail, women from the county jail, since 2018, and placed a majority of them in specialized interim housing settings that allow women to remain with their children until they can move into permanent supportive housing. As of December 2018, 146 pregnant women had been diverted from LA County Jail, and 117 remained active with us. Between April and June of 2020, 15 new pregnant women entered the program, and 44 are currently in permanent supportive housing. The way that the program is designed is our medical director every day gets a list of pregnant women in the jail. And the reason that the Sheriff's Department knows who's pregnant in the jail is every woman who's booked in is provided a urine test to determine whether or not they're pregnant. We get a running list of what that census looks like, and every Friday, a member of my team sends me the weekly census of who's in the jail, where they are in the legal proceedings that are pending against them. So we are very, very focused on removing pregnant women from the county jail. Yeah, I think I'm going to go off script a little bit. Okay, so Eunices has asked me a question, how many pregnant women remain in the county jail? That number is a moving target, Eunices, because every day new women are booked into the jail, and every day some of them are pregnant. When I got my report last Friday, there were less than 20 women in the county jail. And as I recall, 4 of them were pending release to the Office of Diversion and Reentry. 3 of them had charges too serious to be released to us. Some were waiting transportation to state prison, and then we were watching the rest of them to see where they were in their legal proceedings. I'm going to talk about outbreak management. I'm watching my time, so I've been talking for about 10 minutes. I'm just going to sort of go off script here, Diana, for a little while. When the pandemic broke and everyone realized that having folks in the county jail in confined spaces with no ability to socially distance or even wash their hands, the justice community came together to create systems to remove people from the county jail. The Sheriff's Department then began creating lists of people that they believed they had the authority to release under the Rutherford Act and other legislation that allowed them to manage their population in the jail to try to keep it within the federal cap. They began sending those lists to the Superior Court to be vetted by the justice partners. About a month into the process, we were included. The Office of Diversion and Reentry, to begin identifying people who were on those lists that we had the capacity to serve and that we wanted to serve. And so, in addition to that, we reviewed, somewhere on these slides is the number, when we get to it, I'll give it to you. We reviewed a number of cases of people who are pending release. And in addition to which, we were allowed to create our own list of people who are medically vulnerable. We created 2 lists. The first of them were about 280 folks that we knew to be HIV positive. We submitted that list to the court. About 50 of those folks were released to us and were placed in specialized care and housing. We also created a list of 1,600 people who were vulnerable, medically vulnerable for a variety of reasons. There's the numbers, including mental health issues, but other more common medical conditions, people who are on dialysis, people who are being treated for cancer, people who had diabetes. Those lists were used not so much to create immediate releases to us, but used by the defense lawyers to identify clients that they represented that needed our services. These numbers are a little outdated. We just did a report to the Board of Supervisors. So in response to the COVID pandemic, 980 people held in the county jail have been released to the Office of Diversion and Reentry across all of our clinical programs to be cared for in the community. Okay, let's see where we are on the slides, Dan. I'll try to get back on track because I know I'm running short on time. So we do a number of things. We've created our own little public health department within ODR. To manage the COVID-19 outbreak. We have 3 reception centers where people come to us from the jail and go to be tested and wait until we can determine whether or not they're COVID positive. Once we receive their negative tests, they go into our typical interim housing placements. All of our housing, by the way, and Troy Vaughn's going to talk about our housing because he's one of our housing providers. All of our housing comes with a complete panoply of services. Anything that's necessary to make people successful in the community, and these are very high-risk folks, right? Anything that we need to provide to make these folks successful, we provide. When people come to our reception centers and test positive or become symptomatic or test positive once they've been released into interim housing, we have created our own quarantine and isolation site. It's a former hotel or motel in Mid-City that has 40 beds, and we are constantly moving people in and out of our Q&I site. We are doing surveillance testing. We are also training our providers and establishing surveillance testing and protocols for our providers to make sure that both the folks that we're caring for and the staff at these programs are safe, because this is, as you can imagine, this is frontline work. These are people that are coming out of the jail. Very many of them have been in isolation in the jail prior to coming to us, and the work is critical. And I'm very happy to see that Troy is on here, and I hope he's going to talk a little about what he does, what his providers do to assist us with this. This is, so we have 4 buckets of work. I've got about 9 minutes left, so I'm going to pick up the pace here. We have 4 buckets of work. Our first bucket of work is what I've been focused on so far. It's our jail-based diversion work. And I could talk for 3 or 4 hours on our jail-based diversion work, no problem, unscripted, but I'm trying to do this in 20 minutes. Our second bucket of work is what we call the community-based diversion program. Harm reduction, community-based diversion work. Law enforcement assisted diversion, our lead program, is our premier community-based diversion program. Eunices was very instrumental in getting the Board of Supervisors to direct us to apply for a grant, which we did. We received $6 million, and we convened community stakeholders and agreed to launch our first lead site in South Los Angeles in North Long Beach. It operates along a corridor of Long Beach Boulevard that has high incidences of sex work and low-level drug use. And those are the populations that we are focused on. The lead model is we train law enforcement officers, we partner them with a community-based provider, and what we do is when people are encountered or at the point of arrest, we offer them services in lieu of arrest. These are the numbers. We have far exceeded our expectations with LEAD. We had no idea it would be this successful, no idea. We have now 136 formerly homeless people who are engaged in sex work and drug use along Long Beach Boulevard in permanent supportive housing and receiving services from us. Nobody, especially me, expected this work to be this successful. This has been a collaboration with the District Attorney's Office, the Sheriff's Department, the City Attorney's Office in Long Beach, and Long Beach PD. And it has been an amazing thing to watch the metamorphosis of police officers and sheriff's deputies when they're given another tool, another thing to do besides arrest people. These are people they deal with daily. And when you train them and give them a tool, an alternative to incarceration, and they learn how to use it, they use it. So this is one of the things I hope going forward there's going to be an emphasis on expansion for. We have 2 more LEAD programs. We have the LEAD Hollywood program, which launched last spring, and we are about to launch an opioid-focused site at the East LA Sheriff's Substation, which I'm very excited about. So that's that. Our naloxone distribution program. this is a very interesting, progressive, forward-thinking program intended to reduce the rate at which people overdose. People who leave the county jail who are opioid users are at a far greater, they're in far greater danger of overdosing, because what happens is their bodies detox during the time that they're in the county jail. They go back into the community and they start using opioids at the rate that they were using them prior to going in, and the rate of overdoses accelerates. We are training opioid users in the jail how to use naloxone. Naloxone is an overdose reversal medication. It's almost 100% effective. We are using the nasal version of it. You just spray it up someone's nose during an overdose and it immediately reverses the overdose. The only known side effect is it also creates immediate withdrawal symptoms for people who are addicted to opioids. We've been training community-based providers how to administer the program. We have had incidences of overdoses of people who are in our programs. We are a harm reduction, housing first program. All of our housing facilities, all of our work with the probation department, supervising people in the community is harm reduction. And what that means, I know all of you are familiar with it, but what it means to us is it's a jail last resort approach. People frequently use drugs while they're in our housing and under our care. We do not return them to the county jail because they're struggling with their unmet behavioral health needs. So we are training folks how to save lives with naloxone. One of the really cool things, and this is a collaboration with the Sheriff's Department, is a series of vending machines, both at CRDF and the LA County Jail, for people who have been trained to use naloxone. It's just like buying candy, except it's free. They go up to the vending machine, they get a dose of naloxone to take with them when they leave the county jail, and they have a card that allows them to get refills if they have to use their naloxone to save a life. Let's go ahead and move on. The opioid program in East LA, Unisys, will be another lead program. It's the same model that you are very familiar with. We'll be working with, there's a very concentrated population of heroin users and opioid users in a couple of neighborhoods in East Los Angeles, and I will tell you that heroin use has been an unfortunate presence and feature of the East LA community since I was a kid. Many of the people that they're going to be working with are in fact people my age that have been using heroin in East LA for 50 years. So I'm very excited about this program, but it's a classic lead program. Okay, so we're on slide, I don't know, what slide is this? Okay, so I want to talk to you about our reentry division. No, I'm sorry, I got off track even more than I wanted to. So our second bucket of work is community-based diversion. Our third bucket of work is our reentry division. It's run by one by the name of Vanessa Martin, and generally we are in the business of providing services to people who have been formerly incarcerated either in prison or jail that are intended to reduce their recidivist behavior, reduce the likelihood that they will return to custody. Our two basic sources of funding for this work are SB 678, which is money we receive from the probation department to provide services previously not provided to people on probation to make them successful. And Prop 47, we've received close to $40 million in 2 rounds of Prop 47 grant periods to provide services. I'm going to review these slides with you. I'm not as, can we go back to the previous slide? Okay, our reentry intensive case management system, RICMS, is a case management system with navigation programming serving the justice-involved population. The prominent feature of this program is that it employs people who were previously incarcerated themselves as credible messengers and service navigators for our population. It's easy for us to have ideas and thoughts about what these programs should look like. But when they're most effective is when we employ people who have actually been impacted by the justice system. We provide residential settings for homeless clients to meet primary ICMS needs. We are working alongside fellow grantees from the mayor's office, Mayor Garcetti's office. Okay. We've received a second round of funding from the BSCC. We're going to continue to provide our reentry case management services, but we're also going to be doing some new employment training services focused on career pathways in high growth sectors, including training and skills experience under the sector program, which will be funded through state funding. Okay, let's see what's next. All right, this is a description of our reentry case management services. We work with Whole Person Care, collaborating with the Department of Mental Health and the Department of Probation using AB 109 dollars that have been previously referred to for clients who are under supervision having been released from state prison or the LA County Jail. We have 29 providers throughout Los Angeles County and 100 community health workers. The community health workers are those folks that I refer to as people with lived experience, previous justice involvement, that assist our clients in connecting with services. We have 2 new interim housing sites. This is a new feature for us, a relatively new feature. Prior to this month, we had only 20 beds of housing for the reentry population. Through Christ-Centered Ministries, their director is present with us today, Troy Bond. And First to Serve, we've added 56 new beds to our portfolio of housing for people in the reentry population. We're very excited about it. Since its launch in April of 2018, we have served over 14,000 persons with justice involvement through a variety of interventions. Referrals come from the probation department, CDCR, county jails, and community-based organizations. Okay, I'm running out of breath. Our INVEST program is a job services and training program that we collaborate with the WEDAX on. We are providing adult felony probationers with a path to a living wage employment through individualized employment support, services, and training. We provide career development, planning, training, and support to clients from 2 co-located probation offices and 2 American Job Centers. We currently have 1,162 individuals. I can't read the slide because I just got a chat. Okay, I'm going to try to answer that question in a second. Once at capacity, we expect to enroll 600 clients per year. Let me look at the last question I got because I'm getting a lot of stuff on the, wow. Okay, on the chat. Diane, I think I'll wait until I finish to go on the chat and answer these questions. Is that okay? Okay. I see her nodding her head, thumbs up. Okay, let's go to the next slide. I think I'm getting close here. I think we've talked enough about INVEST. Let's go. I'd like to get to YDD before I run out of time. All right, I'm just going to start talking until the slide pops up. The Office of, yeah. This didn't go quite as planned. I'm not usually this scripted. YDD was a program that was, and I wanted to spend more time talking about this particular issue. So I'm gonna use this slide and this conversation to also talk about racial disparities within the county jail population. The Office of Youth Diversion and Development was created and placed within the Office of Diversion and Reentry after a one-year study and stakeholder engagement process that included community-based partners and law enforcement, with the notion of creating a county-wide system of youth diversion where we would divert young people who are having their first law enforcement contact at the moment of arrest away from the criminal justice system and into services. All of the studies show that that sort of diversion program reduces recidivist behavior and increases all measurements of outcome: education, training, employment, and criminal justice involvement all go up if early intervention is in place. The program was created directly to address racial disparities in arrests and filings in Los Angeles County. The vast majority of kids being arrested in Los Angeles County are cited into the probation citation diversion program, or kids of color, either Chicano kids, Latino kids, or African American kids were being brought into the criminal justice system disproportionate to all other groups in Los Angeles County. And so we have been tasked with addressing that problem head on. We currently have 9 law enforcement partners. Actually, we have 9 community-based provider partners and 7 law enforcement partners, including the Sheriff's Department, LAPD, and then a number of municipal police departments. There are 50 municipal police departments in Los Angeles County, and our goal is to have service agreements between all of those departments and community-based providers over the next 10 years. It is a slow process, to say the least, but it is effective, and it is timely because the whole country is having a conversation about why it is, as Eunisses has pointed out, that the worst things happen disproportionately to communities of color in this country. It's not a new conversation. We were having it in the dark ages when I was in college. It's one of the things that motivated me to go to law school. And the conversation hasn't changed much. The dropout rate in LA City schools is still dangerously high, contributing to engagement in the criminal justice system, and we are trying desperately to deal with that. I wanted to talk a little bit about a study that we did because it came up, and then I'm going to go to the chat and try to answer some questions. And I'm way over time, Diane. Do you want me to keep talking or what?
If you want to just mention the study, and then I can put a link for it in the chat, and we can, and then we can go to the question.
I would encourage all of you to take a look at this study. It's not difficult to understand. It's not lengthy. It was done by our clinical team. Our forensic psychiatrist, medical director, and her team did a study, a data study of the county jail population, and it shouldn't surprise anyone. The number that I use, Eunisses said 8%. I think it's 9%, but it's either 8 or 9% of the population in Los Angeles County is African American. In the Los Angeles County jails, general population African Americans represent about 31% of the general population, more than 30%. When you do a statistical analysis of the population of persons who are in mental health housing in the jail, and prior to COVID, it was 1/3 of the population in the jail was in mental health housing. Now it's more than 40%, because as the populations were being decreased, the mental health population was not coming out at the same rate that the general population was, and there's lots of reasons for that, I assume. In any event, more than 40% of the mental health population in the jail is African American. The statistics should be alarming. They're a disgrace, and they speak to the lack of mental health services in the community, front-end mental health services in the community that could keep people from coming into the county jail, which has become the default treatment facility for Los Angeles County. The Los Angeles County Jail operates the largest mental health hospital in the state of California. It's just unacceptable, and the Board of Supervisors recognized that when they received a report from Jackie Lacey, the Blueprint for Change, created the Office of Diversion and Reentry, and directed us to do something about it. So we're working on it. We're hoping to see an expansion of our capacity and resources in the upcoming years, but unfortunately, the budget's not looking real good. So we're going to wait and see how things roll out in September. Okay.
Thank you, Peter.
You're welcome. I don't know what to do about these questions.
Yes, so the first question is in what depth does your program work with incarcerated parents in communicating incarcerated parents to progress to DCFS regarding their case?
So
As a
Diana,
former social worker with DCFS, one area that was lacking was the communication of parents between the institution and DCFS. And the discussion, including parents that are incarcerated in the DCFS meetings that include their children. So they're really interested in the connection to DCFS.
I'm going to try to answer this question. I'm probably the least qualified person on my team to answer it. I'm guessing Diana has a better answer to this question than I do, but we work with the Community Transitions Unit of the Department of Health Services and Whole Person Care to do reentry planning for people in the jail. It's a difficult bit of work because the county jail population is so fluid and people are frequently released before we know they're going to be released. And many times people are difficult to connect to services. That having been said, one of the things we do with people in the jail, if folks in the jail have kids who are involved in the dependency system, we try to engage them in trying to remember the word, but services that reunification services. We run the first of its kind community reentry center in Los Angeles County. It's across the street from the Coliseum. It's a collaboration with the probation department, and we have services on site every 5 days a week, including county department services, including services from DCFS that assist, and legal services from LawFlow that assist parents in the reunification process. So we're fully engaged with that population of parents who have been separated from their children because of law criminal justice engagement. And I'm happy to try to provide you with additional information about that, but we are working directly with DCFS to try to reunify folks with their kids.
Yeah, and that is no more realized than in our maternity programs and partnerships with ODR, the community stakeholders, and Department of Children and Family Services, where we, as Judge Espinoza already alluded to, mothers that were in jail while pregnant were released into community-based housing, and in that process, relationships with the Department of Children and Family Services, in conjunction with them, rather, to restore not them just keeping their children once they're birthed, but also restoring them to their whole with the other children that were estranged from them while they were incarcerated. So we've been seeing great numbers and success in moving those mothers into permanent housing and then helping them to reunite with the children that they've been estranged with while they were incarcerated within the system.
Thank you both. Thank you both so much. Jose, we hear that need. I think there was a ATI recommendation that also specifically spoke to that, to really be able to strengthen the family reunification work that Judge Espinoza and Troy have highlighted. And I know Department of Mental Health also has a program that works with this population as well. And the alternative custody program is another tool that could be used at the court level to really ensure that people are reunified with their children. So thank you, Judge Espinoza. That was such a thoughtful presentation, and it's just kind of incredible to see. You know, I remember being in the Board of Supervisors the day that ODR was created, alongside, you know, the movement forward of the jail plan that no longer exists. But seeing the board created in about 5-6 years ago, and now, you know, witnessing all of the programs that y'all have implemented, it's really remarkable to see. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to send it over to Troy now. I am going to just share his bio. Troy Vaughn. Mr. Vaughn serves as the executive director and chair of the Los Angeles Regional Reentry Partnership, LARP. LARP is a network of over 400 organizations throughout Los Angeles dedicated to creating viable housing employment solutions and system-wide policy change for formerly incarcerated persons. Mr. Vaughn is also the co-founder and president of Christ-Centered Ministries, which is a nonprofit organization where they own and operate restoration homes and provide invaluable community outreaches, including food pantry, clothing distribution, health fairs, etc. Throughout his 20-year career, Mr. Vaughn has held a wide range of executive roles for large nonprofits in the LA area, including CEO and COO of the federally qualified healthcare centers, COO of Shields for Families, CPO for LAMP Community, and executive director and vice president of the Weingart Center for the Homeless. He also serves on the Public Safety Realignment Team as the CBO/FBO representative and the Office of Diversion and Reentry's Permanent Steering Committee as a CBO representative for Supervisorial District 2. Mr. Vaughn is active professionally in local, state, and federal initiatives for profit and nonprofit organizations providing services to disenfranchised communities, including programs on institutional community systems analysis and community and public health relations. He was invited to the White House during the Obama administration to discuss implementation of LEAD. He also has been instrumental in the successful growth, innovation, branding, and integration of key systems and program designs with the reentry, homeless, and healthcare sectors, including for families, TAY, veterans, formerly incarcerated, substance use, mentally ill, and chronically homeless people. I have known Troy, I think, since LARP was created. I remember I was working with CURB around the time that LARP started being developed, and have learned a lot from Troy, and just greatly appreciate your leadership and friendship. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Diana. And to my co-panelists, I am always amazed at the work that we do. When I see that in Unisys, I'm so godly proud of you and your complete maturation in what you're doing, and co-founding of your new entity. I wish you the greatest success. And my great long-term friend, Peter Espinoza, he and I have been connected by the hip in terms of really trying to and doing really significant work as it relates to innovation and really impacting homelessness and mass incarceration within our communities. So I'm excited to be here. I won't be before you guys long. I prepared some slides because I'm older and I need to keep my thoughts about me. I'll try to speak in a very controlled fashion. I can't be as eloquent as those that went before me, but with all the great detail and work that they're doing, but I'll do my best. Let's see if we can get here and do a slideshow, play it from the beginning. Hopefully you guys can see it. I'm gonna tell a little bit about my story, give an overview of what LARP does. As both Peter and Diana just said, I oversee several organizations. LARP is a network that we started, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Look at historically how we got here in this place, because you can't really deal with the issues until you understand the root causes of what we're dealing with. And I've been doing this work now for close to 30 years. And it's important that we begin to continue to educate ourselves and those that come behind us to help them understand what we need to do to dismantle mass incarceration and systematic oppression of people, and particularly in our country, people of color. Looking at the reentry landscape, what's working, what's not, and then some next steps. And so, I was homeless in 1992, and I had been homeless for 7 to 9 years. And I came out of my homelessness in 1992, a homeless vet, a felon, and dealing with drug-induced psychosis, sleeping in cardboard box on Skid Row in downtown Los Angeles. And today I'm a man of faith, husband, father, grandfather, pastor, teacher, educated, successful Black business owner, serving one of the largest reentry networks in our county. And so, and I would fact to say the nation. That's my claim to fame. And that's why I'm so passionate about empowering people with lived experience and helping to change the system of mass incarceration or racial inequities of people of color and justice involved populations. And so I come from a place of experience and passion when I do this work. But I'm also an educator. And so I really like to root myself in data and frameworks. And the reason why I co-founded LARP was really to create a collective voice. You know, I run organizations, and so LARP is a network, and I want to make that clear because, you know, it's grown immensely where we have staff and programs, and it's just an amazing evolution of what a network can do when we join together to really deal with issues. But it's a network of public, community, and faith agencies that advocate together to ensure that reentry systems meets the needs of our agencies, communities, and the people we serve. And we look at things like public policy and capacitation in order to get our work done. And we do that work through what we call working issue committees: housing, education, employment, integrated health, policy, and legal, faith, and civic engagement. And then regional work. We have 4 regional anchoring areas in which we serve, which is the Pomona area, Antelope Valley, West Los Angeles, and Long Beach. And they're anchored by 4 organizations and those community stakeholders within those communities that mirror our central command, which is Central LARP, which is here in Metro LA. But all of those reentry hubs is where we work through those reentry communities and really get the work done to really, in fact, bring about change where it comes to reentry. And the power of LARP is really about its voice, right? And our mission, right, which is to support the development and implementation of a comprehensive, culturally competent, and effective community reentry system by providing a strong community voice in public policy and funding decisions, by serving as a convener of reentry service providers, advocates, and other stakeholders, and by building capacity across the county to meet the needs of the reentry community. This is extremely important for us to understand as we begin to anchor ourselves in our conversation, because if we don't come together, right, to get the work done, then we cannot really accomplish what we say we want to accomplish. It's going to take a collective voice and power really to bring about the change at multiple levels. And in order to do that, we need to understand the historical context. And so there's some key factors that got us to this place. And I want to start off in 1865, where, we see that 13th was ratified and created what I believe a freedom loophole in the system that really began to be bled into our whole democracy and created an opportunity for people to capitalize on other people and to continue to have them enslaved in market trade. So we look at the emergence of the Southern state enacted Black codes. Then racial reconstruction and birth of the KKK took place, post-Civil War took place. Then we see the emergence of the Jim Crow laws happening, civil rights movements then happen. Nixon creates the war on drugs in America. The concept and the idea of the war on drugs really began to embed itself on this classism and this separation of how we do work here in America. And then Reagan repeals the Mental Health Systems Act enacted by Carter, and then we see that the OBR Act was created. And then here we come, Reagan and Nancy start talking about the Just Say No campaign. And what happens in a mindset of America is now we have a them and an us mentality, those that use drugs, those that are part of that system, and those that are not, and classism, and all of that begins to give birth into our nation, and then we have a problem. George W. Bush creates ONDCP, which is creating this whole office within our national government system that actually wages war on a particular class and group of people. Bill Clinton comes with 3 strike crime bills and 3 strikes, and then creates a police force that is actually militant in our country that actually begins to equip them to oppress a people group. We need to understand that. And then we have in our country in the early 2000s, 10% of our people in prison have disorders. Why? Because we shut down state hospital systems. We started creating hospital systems in our institutions. And because of that, we started to see the gap widening where the disparities that we're going to talk about are why we got here in the midst of a COVID environment. 55% of experiencing homelessness have emotional or psych conditions. And we can see in reports that are recently being created by the Office of Diversion and Reentry's clinical team, how these impacts have really begun to exacerbate our systems. And now we're here today where we see 35% decline in mental health treatment in federal prisons across our nation. This is a problem. It's a systemic problem that we have to continue to understand. And COVID-19 has begun to highlight and bring awareness to what we've known historically from a data perspective, but now we can get a chance to address it. And when we look at historical content in terms of the adversity, which includes slavery, sharecropping, race-based exclusion from health, educational, social, economic resources, it translates into social economic disparities experienced by Black, African American people, and other people of color. And so these disparities create these gaps and it prevents people from moving into access, which is really what we need to have within our communities. And so racism has been baked, you guys, into our public and private systems for generations, leaving us with troubled levels of institutional racism that must be intentionally undone. We cannot think that we're going to do a one-size-fits-all strategy in order to deal with these issues that we're facing in front of us. And right now, it's being exacerbated by things like a pandemic. I'll talk about that in a moment. And so while we see the implementation of the Affordable Health Care Act has helped to close the gap of uninsured individuals, what we still see in our system is 11.5% of Black Americans versus 7.5% of white Americans were still uninsured in 2018. So we have an access issue to coverage, to insurance. And when people cannot get healthcare coverage, then when a system like a pandemic takes place, then they are the ones that are left vulnerable within the community. So it's because it's systemic, because people don't have access. And also because we have classism in our communities where there's certain types of jobs that people hold that continues to put them in harm's way because they have to continue to go to work where other type of professions allow people to work from home. And we have to understand the differences when we start talking about what are we creating to give people greater opportunities of success. In 2019, 58% of Black and African Americans, young adults from 18 to 25, and 50% of adults 26 to 49 with serious mental illness did not receive treatment. And so when we talk about people not being able, it's not that they don't want treatment, they can't receive treatment, they don't have access to insurance to get the treatment that they need. And so we need to understand these things and other factors. I won't belabor you, got a lot of data today, but I want to just kind of highlight the main issues so we can get into some of the solutions, right? People of color represent, as already been stated by Ignatius and both Peter, make up 13% of the general US population, but nearly 40% of the prison population. This is a problem, right? Like when we have a group of people that is the lowest in percentage of the whole population, but make up the largest population within our criminal justice system. And when we do this, what we do is say, we created an engine that continues to perpetuate a slave mentality and a mentality that continues to oppress people. And we can no longer do that. And that's why you see an uprising happening within our communities, that people are just exasperated and tired of really the levels of oppression that has come about and that we face today. And I'm so excited. You know, years ago, I used to do all the marching, and when I was a young person, I see all the young people doing it. I don't know about you, Peter, but I'm glad the young people got energy today to really keep the fight going. But we've done this work, right? We've done marching and picketing and standing in crowds and really knocking down the walls. And we still need to do it no matter what our age, and we need to be more mindful of it. But it's a fight that needs to continue at all levels. But unless we take it to the poll, unless we take it to the ballot box, right, and really begin to do something about it, we're not going to have the change that we desire. Here's some facts. The pandemic is exposing racial disparities like no other event that I've ever seen in my lifetime. And so this is really an exciting but scary time for our nation, right? Because COVID-19 is infecting and killing Black people at a far higher rate than any other group. And this is scary. You know, I'm a Black man, and I do this work for my people, but also other people of color and communities, because people that have been impacted like me. When I got home from the Marine Corps many years ago, I was suffering from drug-induced psychosis, and I was living on the street, and I felt invisible for years, and there was no services available to me. And I couldn't really access care. Now that's tragic when you think about somebody who served their nation not being able to access care. And when I walk the streets of Skid Row now, serving on the board of one of the largest mission providers in Los Angeles, it really is overwhelmingly startling to me that I see that the situation has not changed, it's gotten worse. And the reason why it's gotten worse is because there's no access to care. What we see on an average of people of color representing 57% of all COVID-19 deaths happening across our nation, more than 3 times higher than any other racial demographic. That's scary. And so when we don't realize that a people is really being decimated, a people group is being decimated in front of us, and we're not really doing anything about to change the system, and we're fighting these little scrimmages, we're really not focusing on the big solutions and the big problems, we got a problem, right? And we have to begin to address it in a very systematic way. Look at this, and when we adjust the rates and the numbers that we get, I read a lot of reports, and I just put some numbers up and some graphics for you guys so you can get an idea of what's happening. It's not just the older groups. When we adjust the rates down to the younger population, we're seeing still high numbers now being impacted by our young people. Black, the indigenous people, Latinos, Pacific Islanders still are ranking 3 times more higher death rates in our country than a Caucasian person. This is a problem, right? And it has to do with access to care. It has to do with educating our communities and bringing resources within our communities, not just releasing people. Like we have to focus on releasing people from the system, but without adequate services that they can go into, we're only exacerbating the situation. And so it always has to be a balanced conversation. Yes, we need to release people from institutions, and because people shouldn't be institutionalized when they're suffering from chronic conditions, but they should be in community-based services. But we're not erecting community-based services at a proportionate rate that is necessary to absorb people being released, so they're ending up on our streets. This is a problem. And so if we don't really begin to address it in a very systematic way, we're going to continue to and then it's going to be a different type of pandemic that you're going to see. It's going to rage out of proportion, and you're not going to be able to control it. So how do we address behavioral and health racial inequities? One bite at a time, right? Focusing on institutions, right? Institutions, and not just jails, but I would say even kind of hospital institutions and settings that need to remove people back into community and kind of reverse some of the stuff that happened during the Reagan era, right? Looking at the judicial and the legal system to dismantle it in a way that really creates new laws. We have to be mindful right now. Other laws and efforts are taking place to undo work that we did here locally and nationally to really create reform within the criminal justice system. And so a lot of times we're asleep at the wheel when other people are doing other things, and then we wake up and we're like, how did that get passed? Like many of us are waking up right now and saying, how did we get in this situation? Because we didn't go to the ballot box, right? And so, or we didn't think that our vote counted, right? And so we ended up in this situation. We have to focus on the collateral consequences. There's a lot of efforts happening here locally that are focusing on these collateral consequences. Now, it's great to talk about them in slide presentations and numbers and look great when you're doing a presentation, but the real work is happening when you are unraveling these collateral consequences and creating capacity for people that when they're coming home. And then how do we work in partnership within community? I think a lot of times we talk about our justice providers from a community standpoint, but then when it comes to community, we don't work together. And when we don't work together and band together, we lose the power, right, of how we really impact change within our communities and within the system. Now because I'll dabble into, have expertise in so many different sectors, I really am big on creating healthy community-based restoration models to break the cycle of mass incarceration and homelessness. And how do we create healthy living within the community? Peter alluded to the fact that we partnered together on creating housing, and we've created successful, like 20 plus community-based restoration housing with ODR. And there's hundreds of more that we created with these new emerging models like MIST and FIST and LEAD. And now we're doing work within the reentry space. Why is this important? Because we have to be able to demonstrate that people can return to community, live in community without the impact of being incarcerated or oppressed by a legal system, right, that continues to keep them down. We have to be able to show that we can police ourselves within community, and we've created models that demonstrate that. Okay, we hear a lot about structural inequities and biases and social, economic, and political drivers that we need to look at. And people like to talk about social determinants of health, but really you need a level of subject matter expertise to really understand how do you embed and begin to address the social determinants of health in a very proactive way that creates these balances within community. And a lot of converging sectors are necessary for us to get there. Transportation, education, employment. I tell people all the time, you know, I've had the privilege of looking at the city reconstruction plan. And if you don't really get into looking at these plans and really begin to understand, you're kind of lost in the conversation when you don't follow the transformation of the corridor, the transportation corridors. You're not really following with the pattern, the map. And UCLA did a great study years ago where it started talking about the transportation corridor and the effect that it has in communities, and particularly communities of color, because it begins to demonstrate where the resources are going, much like the census does, right? Like much how the census begins to show you where dollars are going to be dispersed nationally. Locally, when you begin to see transportation being affected, you should have your mindset on to be able to drive yourself on where investment opportunities and displacement is happening in those communities, so that we can begin to advocate for community-based programming to be erected within those communities. So we talked a little bit about the collateral consequences, where we see here in California, 48,000 collateral consequences strip people of rights. People like me, right? Like still being impacted and affected for something they did 30 years ago, right? Like when you, even if you have an expungement or you have a pardon, you have stuff that comes up, it still pops up every now and again that makes you go through this traumatic experience. I'm talking from experience right now, that you are not allowed to participate in certain sectors, like being a barber or a dog walker, certain simple kinds of professions that people should have access to. And so we need to be mindful that we still need work to do in these areas. Voter suppression is also real in our world that we live in. Efforts now are happening to control the ballot box. We need to be mindful and engage civically in these areas. So it's not just a one lens thing, right? Like we can't just say, I want to focus on, although I'm focused on closing Men's Central Jail, that's a great thing, but I'm also focused on voter rights. I'm focused on a lot of different things, access to healthcare, because all of these things are necessary for us to impact our systems in a way. Still promoting and benefited from ban the box, clean state laws, etc. The work that is happening across the board. One of the things that I strongly am advocating for while people are still incarcerated is the use of medicated assisted treatment. I think this is important. Why? Because Peter alluded to it already. When people are incarcerated and they have been using drugs, right, for a period of time, and then they have to come off of the utilization of those narcotics, what happens is that if we don't control the usage where they're incarcerated, when they get released, a lot of times we have the greatest overdoses that we have ever seen in our communities, the greatest chance of death. We have to fight that, right? So jail reform is key to ending mass incarceration, right? Not just jail closure, but jail reform. You're not going to be able to close down an entire system overnight. And so while you're working on dismantling a system, you have to have measures of reform throughout the process to create greater levels of access and oversight, like Measure R, really understanding, like, it's great to have an oversight commission, but what do we do when we have that commission, right? Like, how do we utilize that commission, right? A lot of times we fight the great fight. We get the commissions, we get the oversight, we get the propositions, we get them passed, but then we relax, we breathe, right? But continue to work on other things, looking for alternatives to incarceration, expanding on what I think are great services, WIS, MIS, FIS, the reentry, RSCMS, whole person care. These programs have already been talked about today. We have to have opportunities to expand upon those programs and link them to what's happening inside the jail system to what needs to happen outside of the jail system, and really begin to understand what we're doing here. Each of us is worth more than the worst thing that we've ever done. Think about that. One of the things that I like to say from my good friend, you know, I am a fellow of Just Leaders USA. And so years ago, I went through the fellow program. I'm a fellow, a national fellow. I'm connected nationally to all the reentry work because of that relationship. And the founder is a good friend of mine. He's no longer president of JLUSA, but he is the founder, and he and I still talk a lot. But one of the things he used to always say, and I quote him here, is people closest to the problem are closest to the solution, but furthest from power and resources. And you'll hear that a lot because it's true. But what do we see when we see a formerly incarcerated person, a person who used to be homeless, drug addicted? What do you see, right? A lot of times I don't lead with my background because it kind of turns people off. It depends on what environment, because they start only focusing on that. But really, you have people, when you come into this sector, I met people across the world, college graduates, proficient in social media, natural leaders, impacting bottom lines, having all these levels of experience, but still having these thoughts in their mind when they're going for opportunity. Is my background check going to come up? Is this going to keep me from getting a job? Is my expungement good enough? Like all these things, these demons that we play in our head, we have to stop that. People with lived experience have value and should be at the table to make the changes and decisions that we need going forward, right? Because if we're not able to allow people to come in, and we have the diversity on our boards, within our organizations and our committees, how we're leading county infrastructure, it's never going to happen. Some of the things I like us to expand upon, I'm sorry, let me go here. Maybe I ain't gonna do that. That I personally work with is really looking at the Office of Diversity and Reentry, that has been said many times over today. It's been water in the desert for us as a community. The innovation, the leadership that's coming from the Department of Health Services, ODR division, is really impressive. And I really want to see us expand out the reentry component of that. We've done a lot of work in the diversion side of the house through great programs in MIST and FIST and LEAD, but the reentry, we have opportunity to expand. And you saw Peter said there's new programs that are expanding out through LEAD, RCMS. We have now housing programs that are coming through the reentry piece, and we need more of that. And so I'll be advocating in the coming years to continue to advocate for more resources to be invested in both sides of the house and to expand out. I'm having the privilege right now of co-leading, co-chairing the Public and Services arm for the Men's Central Jail closure piece. And one of the things I'm going to be advocating for is to make sure that we look at really how do we expand existing models that are already out there when we talk about service capacitation needs. I'm really looking at work that we're doing with Department of Public Health and SAPC. I need for more organizations to become drug Medi-Cal certified, because here's the thing. If agencies aren't becoming drug Medi-Cal certified, you can talk all day long about putting services in the community, but if they're not doing the capacitation work that's needed to get the job done, it's not going to never happen. So just looking at other things, LARP, I'm proud to say we just got awarded a sizable grant with the state to do a live experience project. And so we'll be hiring a live experience housing coordinator and community coordinator that's going to run that program. And we're going to be having 12 cohort people of lived experience that'll be paid on stipends, that'll be actually going about the community, creating capacitation. And we're working on some other projects where we're embedding people with lived experience in the leadership process. My motto is this: if we invite people to a level of expertise, then they should be paid for it. You don't muzzle the ox to tread upon the grain. So what's working in COVID? Data exchange has been exceptional within COVID. ODR has been doing an amazing job with how we exchange data when people are leaving the jail. We were able to raise up hundreds of beds in partnership with the Office of Diversion and Reentry, the Sheriff's Department, other justice providers and community providers came together to respond to a needed crisis during COVID to actually erect up houses. And I'm talking about in time-saving measure, right? Like, it was pretty quick to really put a system in place. And what happened is that we began to share data in a very strategic control mechanism. I think Peter and Dr. Ochoa has done an amazing job helping to keep us informed, sharing data, getting us the PPE that we needed, and really doing work around jail and prison in-reach, right? We've done a great job working at the state level with the governor's office, really creating beds. We've created just over 3,000 beds working with Amity Foundation, the governor's office, to create and get more money within the STOP system, to create more capacity and bring more community-based providers online, leading to the release of thousands of people within the state system. And so I'm very excited and proud of that work that we've been doing. Continue to advocate and create strategies around housing and other social determinants of health in the weeks to come. Right now, we're getting ready to co-author a design to incorporate people of lived experience, to embed them into some particular in the community in terms of how we address social determinants of health. So I'm excited about that. That work, that academic work that's getting ready to be released by LARP. And so I'm really excited for how we're going to incorporate peer support specialists, people with lived experience into the infrastructure of how we do reentry in our community going forward. You're going to see some great stuff. And one great example of that is the RCS program that we did in partnership with the CEO's office. We were able to disperse, and we just finished phase 1 of that. We're getting ready to enter in phase 2, where people that were returning home got a stimulus card with funding on it that equaled in the amount of $2,750 and was allotted in 3 months period of time, divided in 3 months. And so now we're getting ready to release a smaller portion of that in the second phase, but we're really excited that we were able to partner with many nonprofit organizations throughout Los Angeles County to enact that program with the partnership with CEO. And now we have advocacy to try to get more federal dollars to include in that program, because that's what's needed right now. You have to understand, if millions of people that are coming are unemployed right now, what about the people that are coming home? They can't get a job. They already have all the barriers in place right now. So we have to create and advocate for stimulus dollars for them, for that population right now, because they don't qualify for unemployment. The chances are they back of the line when it comes to getting a job. It's going to be difficult. And so we need to create access. Otherwise, we're going to continue to perpetuate and create systems and opportunities for them to enter back into criminal behavior, not because they're criminals, but because they have to eat. Okay, so like there's a reality to all of this that we have to begin to address. And so really working with primary care providers and specialists are trained to look at right now, how do we do health differently, and we have some subject matter experts that are joining the LARP team in this area to help us think through how do we give access to our people as they're coming home. So what do we need to do? Keep the momentum, scale it up. I don't know what that got on my slide, but things like alternatives to incarceration, jail reduction, whole person care and care coordination, capacity building, housing, leadership, et cetera, community input and coordination. So we need to scale up things that are working, right? We need to see it and ask ourselves what's missing, what's not, how do we sustain it, where do those dollars come? And right now, the dollar conversation is tough, because a lot of our resources came through taxes, and we've been really impacted hard across our system. So people are competing now with resources. So some of the innovation that we were doing prior to COVID is now being impacted, not because people don't want to do it, but because we don't have resources, because there's financial constraints, right? And so there's going to be a lot of stuff competing against that. And so no one can do it alone. This is just an inspirational slide. I want to kind of motivate us and anchor as I close. And the fact that we are our brother's keeper. You know, years ago, I was a part of President Obama's Brother's Keeper initiative. And so that's a part of who I am as a pastor, as a servant of the Lord, and who I am, in terms of really understanding that I have a responsibility to be available to my people, and to be my brother's keeper, my brothers and my sisters' keeper. But to really understand that, you know, we can't do it alone. I'm all about how we're directly or indirectly impacting what we do through our work, right? And we have to always be mindful of the things we say, the things that we do, and how we come together as communities to get the work done. So, so anyway, let's get ready. On the mark. And so we have to anchor ourselves in the belief that what we do can be done. Don't give up. Many years ago, as Eunice just said it, we started out with a 50% campaign years ago, and we was only had 12% of inclusion in the budget for AB 109. I can go on and on historically about how we got to now well past 50-something% of resources allocated to community-based organization, but it was combined advocacy that got us there. But we made up our mind that we won't turn back until our goal is accomplished, and we can't give up. With our last breath, I know that's a very profound statement in the midst of COVID, but with our last breath, we got to continue to fight, and we got to pass on legacy to others that are coming after us and begin to raise up and create succession as we're building this, so that no one gives up on the fight, and just continue to move up. Victory is in our grasp. If we haven't realized anything during this time, is that we can be and we will be victorious. We just cannot give up. It's a marathon, not a sprint, and we'll get there to the end. Thank you for allowing me to share.
Thank you so much, Troy. Appreciate all of the history and just all of the work that you shared with us and all of the work that you've been doing. Thank you. Are there any questions, reflections after Troy's presentation?
Try to stop sharing. How do I stop sharing? Oh, there we go. Stop sharing.
I have a quick comment or question, Troy. This is Arlene Vasquez. I work with LA CADA, and I'm supervisor for our MAT services.
Yes.
How well are we doing as a community responding to the medication assistant needs of our community members? So when we're transitioning them back into the community, are we linking to care, or is it something that we can work together to improve? Because we're certainly trying to reach our communities to educate on the opioid epidemic, their misuse, the different medications that are provided for treatment, as well as reducing stigma and enhancing and increasing access to care. So as a community responsive agency, we certainly want to be able to work with everyone to increase our efforts in reaching our community. So however we can help, Troy, let us know, because we definitely want to be able to work cohesively to better serve our communities, as well as for you, Peter, if there's anything we can do over at the East LA station, because we're seeing that, there is a great need, but we don't have enough engagement. And I certainly, every life is so valuable, and we certainly want to prevent an overdose death. So I'm so happy to hear that at the East LA station, they have the Narcan, and they're receiving the training as well as being dispensed. What can we do, Troy, to improve this? How can we work as a community to?
Yeah, so right now we have our integrated health committee. And so a lot of our provider work in terms of integrated health and how we deal with MAT services is done out of that working group. I mean, a lot of providers from multiple sectors come together to really begin to address it. We partnered with the county to ensure that presentations were going county-wide in presentations. We opened up access to some of our churches and their parking lots to do weekend distribution. Our community-based organizations are actually putting up dispensing, wall dispensing units for access to the Narcan. And so there's a lot of work that's being done. We've been working with closely with Shoshana out of Pierre's office to really get that work done. But more work needs to be done, right? I think really connecting MAT services that are happening inside the institutions to what needs to happen outside in the community is going to be critical to our success to prevention of drug overdose. So I would say you can go to LARP's website, lareentry.org. Look up our Integrated Health Committee, join that committee. A lot of great work is being done out of there. Great opportunity to get involved.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure Bill Tarkanian's already a part of many of the different committees, but I just, and then also, August 31st is our International Overdose Awareness Month. So, just another way for us to reach our community and inform them of all these wonderful services that are there to respond to their needs.
Yes.
So thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. That was wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Hey, thank you so much. Anything else? All right, Frank, can you take us to the next slide?
All right,
So
yeah.
we have some maybe 5 minutes to do maybe one poll. We wanted to share a poll question around, this kind of closure of Men's Central Jail and just get a sense of what you all think should be built on that land instead of the jail. So I don't know, Frank. Oh, there's the question. What would you build on the land instead of the jail? You could just answer that poll and then we'll get a sense right now of what folks thought. Okay, so it looks like the majority of folks said housing. We had some more folks say open space. 50% community said community center focused on youth. So thank you. Thank you for answering that poll. We just like to do the poll after we heard some of the information from our speakers so then we can learn more about what y'all are thinking. In the interest of time, we will kind of close up. But we just again want to thank our speakers so much. We appreciate you three for being here, for all of the work that you're doing to improve LA, to support people coming back home, and to really be a model in California and the rest of the nation. For all of the folks that are watching, now is really the time to transform toward like an equity lens. And we really want to encourage you to join the community leaders that you heard today to take action, to really listen to the data and address the underlying inequities. We hope that you will continue to become informed of the past. I think Troy gave a really beautiful kind of presentation around, what really got us here, what got us to this point of inequity and both justice and health issues impacting Black people and other people of color, brown folks.
It seems her feed has frozen, but also to serve as change agents within your community. And hopefully we've been able to model ourselves after the efforts and great work that's being done by our speakers that presented on those topics. We really thank you and appreciate your contribution. Please be sure to look forward as the next time we hold a town hall, which will be on the housing system, set for September 3rd. And then you can also, again, register via Eventbrite in that regard. On behalf of everyone, the Town Hall Series team, including Jeff Farber of Helpline Counseling, Arlene Vasquez of Lakata, Irene Miro of Whittier First Day, Cecilia Reyes of Whittier First Day, Alicia Martinez Vargas's Public Health, Department of Public Health, Diana Zuniga's Department of Health Services, and myself, Frank Nassar from the Whole Child. We thank you wholeheartedly for your time, your contribution, and what you've been able to impart to us, and in contribution of what needs to be done and our efforts towards transformation toward equity. Thank you so much for all of our speakers and all of our guests. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Sorry, my computer froze.
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, everyone as well. Have a beautiful rest of the day.